Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with an update video. We'll have a bit of a chat about what's happened in Spain over the last week or so, and we'll also go into the press and check out what's happening today, especially in the international press. Now, as you can see, it is a fantastic day, a little bit cloudy. The weather is nice, can't complain. A top today of around 18-19 degrees Celsius, and let's be honest, I'll take that every day of the week. So, what's been happening in Spain over the last week or so? Well, this week has been all about one person, all about the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who on Monday said that he was going to continue in the job as Prime Minister. There was some doubt because the week before he announced that he was taking some time off, a hiatus from politics to reflect and see whether it was worth continuing or not, principally because his wife has been caught up in an alleged corruption scandal, and that's what made him reflect on his position as Prime Minister. But on Monday he announced that he was going to continue. He made it all about me, all about Pedro, and of course that is exactly what he wants. He wants it to be all about him. Maybe he thought the opposition leader, Mr. Feijóo, was getting too much publicity and he wanted to bring it all back to Pedro. And that's exactly what happened. The eyes of the nation were focused on Pedro Sánchez on Monday, and he made some interesting comments. He said that Spanish politics had reached the new low, and he also sent out a warning to media outlets that are not government friendly. He gave the impression that his government wants to clean up these media outlets, as I said, that are not in favour of the government, and let's be honest, there are lots of them out there. But I think we're getting into dangerous territory when a leader of a democratic country starts to say things like this, that they want to clean up media outlets that don't put out positive news about his government and government policy. Because where do you draw the line? Who decides what is good news and what is bad news in a democracy? That's the question. And it wasn't only the press that Pedro Sánchez had a crack at during the week, it was also the justice system here in Spain. He also thinks that he has been a victim of this thing called lawfare, where judges deliberately go after him and his party, and again, potentially dangerous signs for a democracy, in my opinion. Because when you start attacking the press and the justice system, where does it all end? Now, what I will say about all this is that politics here in Spain has got very, very dirty in recent years, but I think it's got dirty in other countries as well. Spain is not unique when it comes to dirty politics. And some of the attacks on the Spanish Prime Minister over the last few years could be considered a little bit dirty, but maybe Mr. Sánchez needs to look at some of the things that he is doing currently, or some of the things that he has done in the past, to work out why the media is so against him, at least some sections of the media. But again, that's just my opinion. And Mr. Sánchez also announced the other day, after 5 days of reflection, 5 days in which he was contemplating leaving politics, that he's come back stronger than ever, wants to continue in the 3 years that remain of this government, and may even seek another term when this term expires. So he's confident that he'll be the Prime Minister of Spain for the next 3 years, and it's going to be an interesting 3 years if Mr. Sánchez does indeed clean out the media and also the judicial system. Interesting times indeed. Now, an article that's caught my attention in the press today is this one here. Apparently there's a survey out about sustainable well-being, and according to this article here, Spain is the 7th happiest country in the world. Living well and healthy does not have to cost the planet anything, according to the study, which analyses the extent to which countries ensure health and well-being of their citizens while respecting the environment. So an interesting piece of news, especially with all of the environmental problems that Spain has currently. I'm going to read on. Spain ranks 7th among the happiest countries in the world in terms of sustainable well-being, just behind Vanuatu, Sweden, El Salvador, Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and tied with Denmark. This is evident from the 7th edition of the Happy Planet Index, compiled by the Hot or Cool Institute, a think tank based in Berlin, Germany, and released this Thursday. The report was first launched in 2006, with subsequent editions in 2009, 2012, 2016, 2021, and 2024. It concludes that a higher level of consumption does not necessarily translate into a higher level of well-being, and that excessive consumption not only harms the planet, but also does not seem to benefit benefit individuals either. Now, 147 countries are featured in this survey, and the ranking is based on 3 parameters: life expectancy, well-being, that is how satisfied people are with their lives, and carbon footprint. And the reason Spain comes in at number 7 on this list is because the country scores above average in life expectancy. That is true. Also in well-being, again, you could argue that that is true, and below the average in carbon footprint. And the article concludes by saying, finally, the study indicates that having a higher GDP does not necessarily lead to well-being within ecological limits. This parameter is a fundamental metric for today's society, but it does not capture everything important because it says nothing about social and environmental well-being, both vital for long-term stability. So there we go, Spain doing well because of life expectancy and well-being. And it is true that people here in Spain do live for a long time. I think Spain and Japan are the 2 countries in the world where people live the longest, obviously because of the lifestyle here, not necessarily in big cities, but in small towns around the country where people live reasonably well, have a good quality of life, good well-being, and of course follow that important Mediterranean diet when mixed with exercise is very, very important when it comes to having a long and healthy life. But when it came to carbon footprint, Spain was below average, and again, no surprises there. So an interesting article. Let me know if you believe in this type of survey, and if you agree that Spain is the 7th happiest country in the world because of the criteria mentioned in this article. Let me know what you think. And the final thing we'll talk about today, the final article that we'll look at today, the ongoing saga here in Spain, the ongoing anti-tourism saga or sentiment that is being felt around the country, most notably in the Canary Islands, where people took to the streets a couple of weeks ago. Some 50,000 people took to the streets demanding a better quality of tourism in those islands, and of course the backlash that came from those protests making international headlines. Now here in the Canarian Weekly, an interesting story, and the headline is, "I'm not coming back next year. The Canary Islands will have to survive without my euros." So the typical threat from an irate tourist. Let's read on. There are hundreds of reasons that can lead to a bad experience or an unenjoyable holiday in any resort or any city in the world. Unfortunately, that's just the fact of life. Anything from the likes of being pickpocketed or having bad weather all week to getting food poisoning or having to be hospitalized due to an accident are all reasons that people will, understandably, decide not to go back somewhere. However, following the Tourists Go Home graffiti and the 20th of April demonstrations, we are now seeing and hearing a new phenomenon, the sadly we won't be back next year one. So an interesting article, and the anti-tourism sentiment in the Canary Islands starting to have an effect. Well, not only the anti-tourism sentiment, also the increasing prices due to inflation and things like that, and people saying that they won't be going back to the Canary Islands, which of course is a shame. But again, let's be honest about this. If you are a tourist in a place like Tenerife or Gran Canaria and you're driving around in your hire car and you see some graffiti on the wall saying "Tourists go home," "Tourists, you're not welcome," and other slogans like that, and then you hear about people getting their rental cars sprayed with the same type of slogan, and you start to ask yourself the question, is it worth having a holiday in a place like this? We've been coming here for years, there's been no problems, people have always been friendly, but underneath the surface there must be an anti-tourism sentiment, people that don't want us here. So what should we do? Should we continue to come back, or shall we go to a place where we are more welcome? That's the question that people are asking themselves. And the Canary Islands, unfortunately, seem to have become a victim of their own success. A very, very popular tourist destination in the winter months here in Europe because of the fantastic temperatures that you get in the Canary Islands. But the locals feel that they are missing out, and this type of tourism is no good for them. And that's why they're complaining, and that's why this graffiti is popping up around the place down there. But again, it all comes back to the same thing, this mass tourism model that Spain decided was going to be the tourism model that the country would follow going forward back in the 1970s and 80s when tourism took off here. Many people got rich with this type of tourism, especially hotel operators, tour operators and also local governments when they were giving out licenses for all of the construction works that were going on. But the average Spaniard who lives in these places where mass tourism is an issue feel that they are not benefiting from it. It creates more problems in their lives than benefits, and that's why they have taken to the streets. So politicians are going to have to start working overtime to find solutions to this issue to keep both tourists and locals happy, and stop kicking the proverbial can down the road, which ends up making these problems bigger and even more difficult for future generations. Fix the issues, keep people happy, or the goose may stop laying the golden egg. On that note, I'm going to wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. If you have anything to add to the conversation today, the comment section is the place for you. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego from a sunny Madrid.